playing Shardless Bug, this would probably be the combo deck that I want to play against the least.
Yeah, I was gonna say of the fair decks, I'm fine with Shardless Bug by and large.
Yeah, I mean, things like Hymn to Torah can be very punishing, but Shardless Bug doesn't have the clock that something like Delver of Secrets does.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it can actually be tough because High Tide can simply rebuild, or in Feline's case, she has Sensei's Divining Tops in her deck and can just like either float her good cards or eventually find what she needs.
Yeah, we'll see the hand she kept. One of the things I kind of like to like if people say, why is High Tide good? And I was like, well, as a combo deck, if you give me until turn 6, I'll probably be able to kill you no matter what you did.
Right.
You know, like eventually we'll get to the point where my hand is like 5 lands in play. My hand is a High Tide, a Time Spiral, and like 3 Pactive Negations and a Fluster Storm. It's like you can't really win through that.
Yeah, just the resiliency is there. And Shardless Bug can have those quick draws where you just, Thoughtseize on 1, Tarmogoyf on 2, maybe like him or a Liliana on turn 3 with a Force of Will, and like that is good enough to put it away. But without the clock, High Tide has so much time to just rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a cantrip-heavy deck. We see Byron with a Thoughtseize turn 1, and he sees a pretty good hand from Feline. She has 3 lands, she has the combo, so she has High Tide and Time Spiral. She has 1 cantrip, which was Ponder, and then a Candelabra, which gives the deck some extra speed as well. There's not much that she needs to cantrip into. He took the High Tide, but the good news is since she already had all the pieces, she can now just use the Ponder to find whatever piece he takes.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember that with Candle, Tide, and Spiral, you can, if you want to, combo as early as turn 3.
Right.
You'll be tied with your first mana, then you tap for 4, untap 3 lands, make 6, you have 1 floating, and you actually get to Spiral with 1 floating on top.
And then conveniently untap all your lands and hopefully keep going.
Just so we see Hymn to Turok, the next spell for Byron, and this is a pretty good strategy, just going after raw cards against the High Tide deck.
Yeah, High Tide is very much a resource-based combo deck.
And we see, it looks like he got at least 1 land. It might have been 2 lands there.
Yeah, the fetch lands are gone.
That's why we don't get random discard anymore. It's because the whole like, oh, you kept a 3-lander. Well, I'll hymn lands 2 and 3 off you. That's just causes for some real great games of Magic. On Feline's side, though, she's going to play a 2nd land and going to Ponder. There is a fetch land on top there. She does need to re-find a High Tide, but with the Candle and the fact that she gets to keep the Spiral, there's not that much pressure right now.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, Byron would be in a much better spot, I think, if he played a Tarmogoyf on turn 2. Like, you certainly don't mulligan this hand, right? Because you have so much disruption, and it gives you plenty of time to find something.
I was going to say, like, ideally he would turn 3 something like a Liliana here, or, well, even a Shardless Agent is fine, too. A little cheeky play there. He cascades into Propagate for the Candlestick. Feline taps and untaps the land and plays land 3. So despite him aggressively going after her resources, you kind of feel like the clock is ticking on Byron here, don't you?
Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, it's like, okay, the Shardless Bug player has a 2-2, and that's great. But eventually, Feline will just build up to Time Spiral. And Liliana the Veil, we see from Byron, is exactly what he wants to be doing now, where it's like you have the initial discard, and then Liliana makes it so it's really difficult for the High Tide player to actually build up to enough resources.
Yeah, and Liliana as a card as a High Tide player, I'm not thrilled to see.
Yeah.
Granted, Feline still has the Time Spiral in her hand. It's possible that she starts comboing as soon as this next turn. If she just has land and High Tide, if she just has land, Tide, and Spiral after her draw step, then it's off to the races here.
Right.
We do see land in her hand. She's got to be careful about making her land drop. She has land preordained Spiral.
Okay.
Almost everything you'd want, but you have to keep a card in hand to discard to Liliana. And I'm a little surprised she didn't just fire off the preordain there.
Yeah, me too.
You know, because you're not going to discard the Spiral to Liliana. You're gonna discard the other card. I would have thought she'd preordain before making the land drop and then decide whether or not she actually wanted the land drop in the land in play. On the other side of it, when you're playing against a heavy discard deck, often what your plan is if you think that they're just going to get your whole hand, because sometimes that happens. Your goal is to just get 6 lands in play, and then using cards like Divining Top and Cantrips, just top deck Time Spiral.
Yeah.
Because if you have 6 islands and you just play Time Spiral, no cards in hand, you are still like an overwhelming favorite to win that game.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, even if you have to pass the turn, what's the worst that happens? You know, like, I guess this turn Liliana takes up to 6, and then Liliana can ultimate, but it's like, you're going to attack me with a Charlotte's Agent and a Creeping Tar Pit? Okay, that's fine, you know? I'll go down to 10.
Yeah, Liliana alting is actually kind of a problem. The choke on the High Tide combo is that you need 3 lands in play to be able to combo, and like, realistically, you'd really prefer to have 4. Comboing off anything fewer than 3 requires a lot of extra pieces.
Yeah.
You need like 3 High Tides naturally in your hand, and then you have to hit 2 more off your first spiral, and you know, things like this have to happen.
I'm kind of surprised to not see a Liliana ultimate there, because I think it's pretty tough for the High Tide player to win if they only have 2 lands.
Yeah, the double Stone Rain's great. If you're using Liliana, if you're even losing your Liliana to just knock off 2 islands.
Yeah, I mean, you know that Feline is floating a Time Spiral in her hand.
Yeah,
so, and she draws the High Tide, so now we actually have a game.
We have more than a game. I mean, this is probably Feline's game, to be honest. All right, we're going to go for it. She top decked the High Tide, and it was the last turn she could do so. So one thing you see her do, she put this, when I watched her combo off before, you see her put a die on her island. That's going to signify the amount of mana islands are currently tapping for. So right now, after 1 time High Tide, islands are tapped for 2. And you could look at this and say, well, you know, she could brick here. And like, while yes, that's true, it's not likely.
I mean, she's put herself in the best position to win, I think. And
Yeah.
I've played High Tide in a couple tournaments, and I literally have not bricked off a Time Spiral.
Yeah.
You're like in the high 90s to not fizzle, right? Something like that. But
Yeah, I mean, it depends, like, you know, like how much mana do I have on top? Do I have a Divining Top in play? There's like quantifiers to it, but 4 lands, islands making 2, this is like your basic combo. I think normally you don't fizzle on the basic combo. You do have to note the fact here that your opponent is playing blue, you've left him with 2 untapped lands, and so not only can he Force of Will you, but he could even hard cast it. Right now, islands are tapping for 3.
yeah, High Tide is both players.
It is, yeah, it's a reciprocal effect, which makes like the High Tide Mirror probably the coolest matchup ever. But if she resolves another High Tide to make islands tap for 4, Byron can simply hard cast a Force of Will. So if possible, she'd like to avoid doing that. You might see her do something like Turnabout to tap him out and then move through combat.
Right. And then, I mean, the Charlotte's Bug deck doesn't have a ton of blue spells. You know, it's generally somewhere like 18 to 22. So it is very possible that you could Time Spiral. They would have Force of Will and not a blue card, so.
Yeah, so what happened there, she used the 2nd mana from that island to cast Candelabra. Islands then tapped for 3, tapped an island for 3, cast High Tide. Islands are tapping for 4, floated 2 mana, and used that 2 mana to cast Merchant Scroll. So right now we have no mana in the mana pool. As you see off the die, islands are tapping for 4, and she's going to go straight for Blue Sun Zenith. Byron, as you can see here, does have a Force of Will. I don't know if he has a blue card to go with it. Because islands tap for 4, he can just cast the thing now. Granted, he has to know that. Not every player, I would say.
Yep.
I would say it's like 50-50 that my opponents know that High Tide's reciprocal.
Sure, yeah. It just hasn't really come up when I was playing the deck, but that is certainly a thing.
You know, you'd have to play the matchup and be like, wait, that card's everybody. And yeah, he's going to play Force pitching Notion Thief.
Notion Thief against High Tide is pretty nice.
Boy, that would have been sweet to have in response, wouldn't it? She's going to Fluster Storm that spell. So how many spells? The question is, how many spells have been cast this turn? We have Candelabra, Merchant Scroll, Time Spiral, High Tide, High Tide, High Tide, Force of Will. Yeah, that's enough that he
like
can't
8.
pay. Yep. Yeah, that's because Byron has 5.
Yeah.
I will say in High Tide Mirrors, Fluster Storms become the weird, they're like the coolest part.
I know that you just love this, and
Well,
I do too.
It's just math. It's
Sure.
great. It's like, okay, you have 42 copies of Fluster Storm and the stack is 7 cards big. How many would you like to send at each spell?
So it looks like Blue Sun Zenith was for 8 total, and that's basically another Time Spiral, except your opponent doesn't get 7 cards. Presumably, if Byron had any more interaction, he would have used it trying to fight the Blue Sun Zenith.
Yeah, at this point, if I'm feeling, I'm thinking my opponent is F6'd for the turn.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, modern players, that
And
is
Wipe Away is the card, and
time
she's using that as a mana source at this point. Wipe Away targeting her own Candelabra to recast and untap her lands. She's actually going to go ahead and bounce Byron's blue mana. She feels confident enough here.
Yeah.
She wants to, like, she just feel this is a real show of strength.
Yes, certainly.
Eventually, she's just going to, yeah, she's going to knock his mana off the board there and then move through combat.
Yep. Yeah, she has enough stuff going on that she feels like it's not likely he has another Force of Will, right? But that's maybe the only way that she can lose. Or maybe midway through comboing, your opponent realizes that High Tide actually affects your mana too.
So she's gonna play a Divining Tap here. And I mean, yeah, one thing I like about watching Feline play is that she's played the deck enough that she moves through the motions pretty quickly. And you can see right now, she's going for the infinite combo. And this is interesting. Normally I don't see a Capsize in the board, but she's Cunning Wished for Capsize. She can Capsize loop this Candelabra, because Candelabra makes, at this point, a cast Candelabra makes more than 6 mana. So she's going to just keep bouncing the Candelabra with Capsize. And that will make infinite mana for her. So then she can Capsize all of Byron's permanents, which she's going to go ahead and do. And maybe she doesn't have a way to win. Doesn't really need one.
Well, you have top Capsize, right?
Right, so the top Capsize, if you don't know this interaction, she taps for the draw a card, then put top on top of her library, and in response, she Capsizes the Divining Top, so it just draws her a card.
Yeah.
And if you have infinite mana, that means you can draw your entire deck, which she demonstrated the loop and then picked up all her cards. Now she's going to go ahead and Cunning Wish for Brain Freeze, and Brain Freeze for a lot of copies, and then Blue Sun him. Just winning all the way. She's going to mill the deck and then make him draw it.
Yeah, just in case you can kill me on your upkeep somehow.
Yeah. And there you have it. 2-0, Feline Longmore wins over Byron King. And